right, so this is something a little different, especially because I've never done it before. Let's see if I can set this up. All right. All right. Hi. So this is something new for me. I'm doing something of a autobiography about myself. Not a lot of people know who I am, or where I'm from, or anything like that. But I'm not new to being in front of the camera. I'm not new to YouTube or Instagram or any one of those social medias. I've been around for a while, I would say. But to start out, my name is Mitchell. That's my real name. I was born in Redding, California, in 1986. I have three siblings that I grew up with. One brother and two sisters. Although later I found out I have an older sister, and I feel bad for saying this, but I know I at least have one younger brother as well, maybe even two. I never met my father in person, at least in my general memory. I've seen pictures of him and things like that, but for the most part, I was with my mom, who was a single mother for like the first 9 years of my life. My older brother's 3 years older than me, and then I have one sister that's about a year younger than me, and then another sister that is 3 years younger than me. I just turned 40 this year, so that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to make this, so I have something to kind of reflect on, but also, for anyone in the future, I guess, that wants to kind of know me, or for my kids when they're older or something like that, they can always come back and I guess get to know their dad if for whatever reason they want to know more, or but so to start out, living in Reading, I lived there for like most of my life, I would say, up until I had to move with my parents. I graduated from school pretty early too, but that I'll actually branch off to that later. But I'll start off talking about my family. So I have an older brother. He is older by 3 years, as I mentioned. He technically has a different dad than me and my two other sisters. And then my older sister has the same dad, and then my younger brother, our brothers, also have the same dad. So altogether, as far as we know, he has about 5 or 6 children. My blood father. Our family's pretty, I would say, close for the most part. At least we were more growing up. We would go to the lake a lot, spend time together. We do a lot of, like, I guess, potlucks and get-togethers when we were younger. We would go to church together, raised Christian, where we would get to, see a lot more people, of course, but I didn't really do very much outside of my house. Like, we stayed home a lot, apart from, like when we went out to go camping or to the lake or something. But I wouldn't say we were like super, super social. At least I didn't view it that way. I think my parents, they were more social. So, for example, when my mom got married to my stepdad, I think we became a lot more social because he was very social. And my mom is a little bit like me in the introverted side, at least in person. So, as I grew up, a lot of different things, happen. People move a lot. At one point, my family moved into this house in Reading that was like 2 stories tall. It was like the biggest house in the block. It wasn't like fancy or anything. It was just happens to be the biggest. And I think it was more or less of a landmark for the area. And it wasn't like for any reason like spectacular or anything. If anything, we had probably the worst landlord I had ever dealt with in our life, at least from what I remember, because my mom was constantly freaking out about this guy that was like looking through the windows at us and like being really creepy and trying to, like, I guess get us on things that he said that it's just a kind of just a very creepy landlord. I know for a fact he's not the landlord anymore because I believe they sold it to someone and now it's owned by like a different family. But for a long time we lived there, and there was no AC there. There was a huge rat problem, I remember, where they were like eating the inside of the walls. It was terrible. He wouldn't do anything about it. Eventually he did. He didn't like hiring someone to put like a box of poison under our staircase. We had a swamp cooler, and if anyone knows about Redding, California, it's like really dry heat, and then coupled with um, a swamp cooler, which is a evap cooler, would create humidity in the house, and it would, in a way, make it cooler but also hotter. So it didn't always work. Um, and we had a lot of fans running a lot of the time. Yeah, it was very interesting living there. But my grandparents lived basically down the road. And it was weird too, or it wasn't weird, but it was actually kind of nice. They were always really close, my grandparents. They lived down the road, maybe 10 houses. We go there and visit pretty often. Um, at one point, we ended up having to move, and then I don't remember why, but we ended up moving into a house next door to or not next door. It was like maybe 3 houses down, but it was really close. Like I could basically see my grandma's house from where we lived. And at one point we could walk to her house. We would stay the night with her because she had cerebral palsy, and among other things, because she smoked most of her life. So she ended up getting emphysema and eventually succumbing to that later when she was in a nursing home. But while she did live there, that's actually the same place my grandpa passed away too. He ended up having liver cancer, and he passed away in that house in a room that we regularly used for, guests or ourselves when we stayed there. Because it was usually like one of us kids would literally stay there all the time, even when there was like school, but mostly during the summer. We'd go there and we'd spend time with her, of course, and help her eat, take care of her in different ways and stuff like that, like keeping the house clean. But that I would say is actually pretty pretty much later. And so many things happened before that I should really bring up, considering it's an autobiography. But so when I was a lot younger than that, I would say between the age of like 1 and like 5, we lived at a different house. And it was me and, of course, my brother and sister, my mom, or brother, sisters, and mom. And we lived at this bigger house, which it wasn't 2 stories, but it was a very unique house. And if you try to go there now, it's actually a gas station. It's a gas station just on the corner. And another interesting thing was my grandparents lived right next door to us again, like literally next door. And then across from there was my aunt and uncle, who we all lived really, really close together. And it was all interesting at the time. It wasn't like crazy, because it was actually, from what I remember, it was nice to have everyone really close by. Which is interesting now because it's not like that at all now. But I lived there for about, with my family for the first like 5 years of my life that I can remember. At one point, my brother and I were making like a bridge out of couch cushions, and if you know, couch cushions are usually very square and fairly solid, I would say. but it was lined up along a cement wall that was only maybe like a couple feet, as my mom described it. And he basically, my brother made a bridge of those pillows from the small staircase to this wall. Like we were supposed to be able to run past it or whatever, or run over it and then jump off on the other side. Um, and how I remember it is I fell and I hit my head. And how my mom describes it is she's in the kitchen. She walks, or I walk into the door. She's doing dishes or something. And apparently I'm not crying, but I look up at her and I'm like, Mom. And she's like, what? And like looks at me, and my face is covered in blood. And you can actually see there's a little line right here on my forehead. I can't. One of those lines is from old age, and one of those is a scar. But one of these lines on my forehead is a scar from when I cracked open my head. Like it wasn't my skull busted open or anything, but I was only like 5, and went whack right into a piece of cement, and blood just gushed down my face. And it was, as she described it, like a horror movie, because I wasn't crying, but I definitely had blood all over me. And so, of course, I went to the hospital. They put one single stitch in my forehead, and that was it. The whole thing. Another time when I was around that age too, between 1 and 5, I split my finger open. I don't know if you could see the scar there. There's like a crescent-shaped scar on this finger. It's kind of hard to see, but I was basically scooping out a tuna can, and it cut open my finger. That was like 20 stitches from what my mom told me. And I was around, I don't know, like 5 or, I think I was around the 5 or so age as well. But anyways, from there, I moved so many times in my life. It's crazy the amount of times I moved. More than, between the time of like born to the time I was like 20, I probably moved almost equivalent to once a year of my whole life. Like so many times. Because from what I remember, we lived in that house. We lived in an apartment. We lived in another house on a street called Bradley Street. We lived in the Loma house. We lived on another house that was like further north, that my parents were trying to buy. Gosh, they moved to Nevada at one point. They moved to Roseville. They moved to Sacramento. They moved to Lodi. They moved to San Jose. Some of those places I didn't live with them. It was very brief. If I did, it was like a few days at most. But the places I lived with them the most was Redding, Roseville, briefly for Carson City, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. So between all of that, there were so many times I moved, and it kind of sucked because when I was 18, actually I'll get back to that part. So just the moving part sucked, but that's not even one of the biggest things that happened. But anyways, as I got older and stuff, I was all over the place as a kid. We would go outside and play. There was no internet. We had video games, but nothing like substantial. It was like basically Pitfall, Pong, Pac-Man, that kind of stuff. And they're fun, but they're very linear. So like we didn't do very much until we get like, I think until we got like a Super Nintendo or a PlayStation or something like that. And that was a bit later. But our biggest thing that I remember as a kid was going to church a lot, because my mom was a choir director. And so obviously, being the choir director's kid, we were kind of put into different singing type things, where we would be doing also choir, or like just singing hymns and things like that, in Sunday school, as they called it. and later other things. But for the most part, I was more of a actor. Actually, I did plays a lot, um, and that was my big thing when I was interacting like with church and stuff. Um, but it was neither here nor there because the one thing that I still remember to this day is before I was 10 years old, before my mom met my stepdad, we were going to church a lot. She was doing the choir thing. We were staying with these, I guess, basically babysitters, but they were supposed to be through the church, because a lot of the choir side of things was, a lot of women. There was a few guys, but mostly women, and their kids would have to be, babysat. And it was usually about, I want to say 2 or 3 individuals, because there was a bunch of us kids, like 15 of us kids or something like that, including my siblings. At least I think they were mostly there. I think it was mostly actually me and my sisters. I don't remember my older brother being there. But this is where it got tricky, because at one point when I was about 8 years old, and we were going to this church and we were being babysat, one of the babysitters, I won't say her name, but I'll describe her. She was about 16 at the time. She had gone through some trauma from what I know about her. She had been assaulted, um, and also attacked by one of her parents. I think it was her father. But the significance of that was that she had gone through a lot of mental trauma, physical trauma. Physical part being she was burned most of her body, so she had burn scars all over her, and it had healed and stuff over years, because I think it happened at a very young age. But apart from that, something else was going on with her, because at one point she took me to a secluded area. It was, from what I remember, it was an old truck shell that you put on like a pickup, and we went inside, and I didn't know what we were doing, but she did, and she forced me to do things to her. Me, I was only 8 years old, so I remember bits and pieces of it. Um, it's still like, it's crazy how things like that can be so fresh in your mind. Um, but it happened, and I don't think I told very many people about it. But it happened, and I feel like it still affects me today in different ways. But it's interesting, it's not long after all of that, so years later, I might have dreamed this, but I remember seeing her again, because my uncle was a pastor also, and he had a ministry. But her and her mother visited my mom, because her mother and mine were like, I think, choir associates or something. And she was there, and I remember seeing her. And like I said, it could have been a dream, but I believe it happened, where I spoke to her again, and I feel like I remember her saying she was sorry. And I don't remember my reaction to that, because after that I don't remember anything of that day. I just remember that specifically, that she said she was sorry, and I think I forgave her. Like, I maybe because at the time there was a lot going on, but I remember forgiving her for that. Um, Even though it still like crawls back into my brain every once in a while, but I remember so much of it, and it sticks with you. And I think that's something that frightens me to this day, because I have my own kids now, and to think that I might be putting them in a situation like that unknowingly is is devastating to say the least. But that's, like I said, that's one of the things that scares me about putting them out into the world like that, um, where anything could happen, you know. And I think that a lot of parents feel that way, but having experienced something like that, it's even worse. But yeah, it I think it messed with me in different ways that uh, probably won't be the same, or probably won't be what I was before it happened. But I mean, it happened so young. What else, you know? And I think that a lot of people think that way too. Is like, oh, it happened so long ago. What does that mean, like, to you now? It means that I'm afraid for my kids. Um, I think a lot of people are right now afraid for their kids because of like guns and stuff. But there's still things out there as bad, if not worse, in a way. Um, so I think if anything is a cautionary tale, just kind of keep that in mind, I guess. But you know, always stay vigilant, especially in teach your kids how to be vigilant. You know, and recognize things that um, should be recognized and avoided, and you know, situational awareness and things like that. Because I don't think there's an age where you can't teach that at all. So, anyways, sorry to bring that down, but yeah, that only happened once or maybe twice. That part's a blur too. I'm pretty sure it happened more than once, but it felt like the same day. Um, but yeah. Anyways, past that, past being part of like the church and part of the choir and everything. At one point, my mom left that church altogether. Totally different church than what my uncle started. He started actually a ministry, um, where when I was 9 years old, it was brand new thing, um, in Reading, where they started providing clothes and food to the homeless. And you know, they cataloged everything. They took um, inventory and things like that. They also did a lot of uh, outreach, I guess, as well. My uncle also did services on Thursdays and Sundays, which was really big. A lot of people loved it. A lot of people miss him for that. Um, it was later taken over by a different group. Unfortunately, the group that ran the other location. Um, and I think it's probably still kind of ran by them. Not maybe the same people. Actually, I think actually that person might have passed away not that long ago. So it's hopefully ran by someone um, new and better. But I still think that whole thing is a great thing for you know, outreach, and you know, they had tons of volunteers. We had volunteers all the time. I volunteered for most of my life, just going there with my mom, who again did choir there. She sang for the band, the church band. We did a lot of plays and things for Christmas, Easter. We did a few for like my school, because I was homeschooled for a bit, and we had like a little thing that we did there. Um, a lot of cool memories there. I mean, like I said, I did that for I want to say between 5 and 10 years while my uncle was still active. It was great. Like we did Thanksgiving every year, where we cooked so many turkeys. We did probably upwards of 100 turkeys. I swear. Like it felt like so many. It probably was only like 30 or something, but it felt like a lot. You know, when you're a kid. We got to meet a lot of really cool people, and I met a lot of really cool kids too when I was there. I mean, I basically inherited these individuals that I would later call my cousins. They basically were my cousins because we were around each other like um, every weekend, almost every summer. We go hang out. We go camping and things like that. And that was another really big one, actually. When I was about 10, maybe 11, after my uncle has already had this place open for about a couple years, maybe three. And like I said, we were getting a lot of volunteers. One of the guys that was a constant, and he come from across the street where they had an AA over there, where Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous was. It was all in the same building essentially, and a lot of those guys would come over because it was kind of the same message in a way. So we got more people to be there on Sundays, and we would talk a lot. And my parents met this guy we all called Dale. I'm not sure if that was his actual name, and I'm frustrated that I don't remember his name, his full name, um, because he was one of our one of my best friends, I would say, at that age, because we would go camping almost every summer. Like it was either beginning of summer or towards the end of summer when it was starting to cool down. But we would always go to. It was like a big group thing. There was other kids there. We'd go jet skiing. We'd go just hiking, just mess around. We were kids, like we'd do all kinds of stuff through like shaving cream cans, like the little ones, into the fire. Be total stupid, idiots about it. My cousins would go with us, or at least one of my cousins would go with us, and we would always go, and we'd go fishing, which was another big thing. But yeah, probably some of the best highlights of my years when I was a kid was going out and doing that kind of stuff. When I was, I would say, in school, that was also a really interesting thing. So, preschool or no. So my earliest memories of school was fourth grade, of all things. I don't remember anything before fourth grade as far as school, and I don't know why. But I went to a school that back then was called Cedar Meadows. And Cedar Meadows was like a really small school. And at the time that I went there, they were transitioning from Cedar Meadows to a new location called Turtle Bay Elementary, or it was a K through 8 school. And so, anyways, they ended up doing that. But before all that, when I was going to school in fourth grade, that I can remember, one of my earliest memories, and this is kind of a funny, cute thing that I experienced when I was a kid. So there's definitely a song about this at some point, maybe a country song or something. But there's that whole trope, especially with kids and like younger stories and stuff, how there's always someone that writes on a piece of paper and says, "Will you go out with me?" or "Can I be your girlfriend or boyfriend?" or whatever it is. So that's basically what happened to me in fourth grade. For the very first time when I ever noticed girls ever was in fourth grade. And it was because this girl named Heather gave me or actually it was one of her friends that gave me this note. And she gave me a note, or rather, she gave her friend a note who gave it to me. And it said, "Will you go out with me?" Me not even knowing what this phrase meant, except for literal sense, I looked at it and I was like, "Go out where? Like outside to recess? Like it's not time yet." Like I had no idea what this meant. I ended up asking another kid that like sat next to me. I was like, "Hey, do you know what this means?" And he's like, "Oh, go out." I was like, "No, go out where? Like, to the jungle gym or something like that?" And he's like, "No, like a date." I'm like, "Well, it's like Tuesday. What do you mean, like a date?" And like, I had it literally explained to me in the most basic of terms. So it was eventually got to me. Like, someone finally figured it out, or figured out the best way for me to figure out how to, or at least they figured out the best way to explain it to me, where I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, what? Okay, but sure, whatever." And I am, saying yes, of course. And I remember at the time she was like, I guess one of the cuter girls of the class or something. I mean, I was still very, very uh, unaware of these things, I guess you could say. So, it was also within that time that I probably learned about the most basic version of heartbreak, because within like not even a day, she had already given the same note to another boy who also said yes, and like it was like over at that point. So like there was no period of time where we were actually together or anything like that. As fourth graders would, whatever you call that, right? Of course, nowadays, a fourth graders, they share messages on freaking Instagram or some stuff like that. So, anyways, it became this whole thing. It's funny too because I remember being upset about it, and then other boys coming up to me and like, "Oh, she did the same thing to me." So it was like a group of us guys that were totally mean to her after that, and I felt bad about it later, but like I remember feeling really bad about it, and me and like four other guys who got the same message, and she tried to do the same thing to, just giving her the worst, worst time about it because she just didn't know how to make up her mind or something. But I remember a chant. It was the dumbest chant that these kids made up, and it was like, "Heather feather, what's the weather?" or something like that, and it was the dumbest thing, but like they kept saying it, and she didn't like it, so it worked, I guess. But anyways, after all that, after fourth grade, we ended up moving to Turtle Bay, and that's where I got to experience more of school, because it wasn't just one grade; it was like all the grades, all the time. And I had some of the coolest teachers during that time in school, because I had one. I don't know if she's still alive because she was already pretty. She was a bit older. I want to say she was probably in her 50s then, which was back in like see, like fourth grade. How old is fourth grade? It's definitely before 2000s, that's for sure. Early 90s, something like that. And I mean, 30 plus years later, right? I mean, she could still be alive, but I mean, if she is, I would love to hear from her because she was one of my favorite teachers. I had this teacher named Mrs. Rankin, and she was the loveliest lady that I can think of, where she cared about all of her students. She wanted everyone to feel welcome in the class. And the reason I say that, and the reason I know that to be true, is one one school, or one moment in school that I can think of, specifically, was when she called up everyone every month, that like when school was starting, every new month, that kids were starting to talk about their birthdays, and she wanted to do something for them. Be like, hey, who has a birthday this month? You come up, and then the next month, come up. Like they just kept doing that, and she would give them a little like gift, and they would go back to their seat, and it was this thing that everyone looked forward to, and it was really, really cool. And when it came to my birthday, because I'm in February, she called up. I was the only person in all of February that had a birthday. And for some reason that made kids laugh. And she got she was very disappointed in everyone laughing. She saw that I was upset, and I'm pretty sure she knew like I'm pretty sure she knew I was upset about everything, being laughed at basically in the middle of school or class where there's like 20 kids. And I mean, I was a weird kid, but I wasn't that weird where I feel like I deserve that kind of stuff. And so at one point, she asked my mom, like she gave me a note to give my mom. I didn't care to look at it, so I gave it to her. and my mom told me like, oh, your teacher wants to take you on a field trip essentially. And she did. She ended up taking me to a Barnes and Noble where I got to pick out like, I want to say 3 or 4 books or something like that, and I picked out some pretty good ones. I picked out like War of the Worlds. I picked out a book about riddles and one about like, what was the other one? I think there was one about jokes or something like that. But I picked out some books and she bought them for me, and yeah, like I was super happy about that. That's probably where I got some of my inspiration, I'd say, when it comes to books in general. Even though I'm not a huge book reader, when I do find a good story, I lock in for that book. And I think her in part of that, um, wanting to learn more, but also experience more with books. So uh, thank you, Miss Rankin, for that, wherever you are. So apart from that, school was very interesting for me. Um, I learned a lot about myself too, because in the same grade, fourth grade, I started getting. I don't think I had bad grades, but I was one of those kids that was distracted easily. And of course, they did their tests at the school, not through like, how they would now. I guess they would tell you to go see a psychiatrist or something like that, and then they would determine whether you have ADHD or whatever. And that's basically what they did. They found out I had ADD, which is the same thing as ADHD now. It's just reclassified. But they sent me home with a note where I had to go to a doctor, and my mom went and got me my medicine, which was like Ritalin. And it's supposed to level you out or whatever, but it was basically speed. It was basically stimulant, and I don't think I took it for more than a couple weeks before I heard about a kid at my school having like basically overdosed, and then I stopped taking it because that made me a little worried, and I think my mom also knew about that too. I was also a little bit of a prankster in school too. Like we do the whole spitball thing. I got in trouble for that once. We were literally taking like a big pin, pulling the ends off, so it was just a straw, and then wadding up like paper in our mouths and shooting it on the ceiling. At one point, we had actually done it so much, me and like a bunch of kids were doing it, and we were like aiming at the same spot. The teachers never looked up, and then this wad fell from the ceiling onto our desk, and that's when we got in trouble. Another funny story while I was in the same school, I think it was a different teacher. I don't think it was Miss Rankin, but it was a different teacher that was getting mad at this kid. His last name was Tucker. I won't say his first name, but his last name was Tucker, and he was kind of the class clown. And he did something that really pissed off the teacher. And when you get in trouble with the teacher, she writes your name on the board. And when she wrote his name on the board, I don't know if it was intentional or if the pen didn't work right, but she didn't write Tucker on the board. She wrote something a little bit more provocative, and you could probably guess what it was. But she caught it, and she ended up fixing it like within a second of writing it on the board. But it let you know what she was thinking when she was writing that name down. What else? In that time too, while I was going to that same school, I made a handful of friends. A bunch of them came to I think it was my 12th grade. No, 12th grade. I think it was my 11th or 12th birthday, and they showed up. I think my mom invited them. I didn't know that they were coming. They all showed up, and we all had this, we had cake and all that kind of stuff. And that was probably one of the most impromptu parties I ever had because I didn't even know anyone was showing up. I thought it was just like me and my family were gonna have some cake and that'd be it. But yeah, a lot of people showed up for the party and we did little games and stuff like that. Some of these guys, they thought they were too cool for it. And I think they gave me they gave me crap about it like the next day or the next time I saw them or something. I remember having a friend where he was a little bit stuck up, and I think because his parents were well off, and like he tried even dating my sister, the older one, while we were friends, and then when they broke up, it didn't work out for us anymore either. And he wanted to be called the adult equivalent of his name all the time, even though he was very much not an adult. But yeah, I've had all kinds of interesting experiences since school, because it was a K-8 school too. So there was points where I was in 6th grade and I was seeing the 8th graders being little weirdos and all kinds of stuff like that. And of course, around that time, people were still freaking out about things like Columbine, and like a repeat sort of situation. One time, I remember they had a situation where all the teachers said that the principal's trophy was missing, and we found out later that was code word for a possible shooter. And they later, I think someone else told us that, or I think my mom found out. I think someone called my mom and told her. But basically, someone was walking along the fence line on the outside and wearing like a long coat and maybe carrying something, and they thought it could have been a gun or something at the time. So it wasn't frightening because we didn't know. Only the teachers knew, and I don't think they were great actors about that either, because I remember some of them being like, oh, we need to lock the doors and do all this kind of stuff. And but that's the funny thing is the school was state of the art at the time. They had cameras everywhere. They had like the smart boards and stuff. Well, not the smart boards of today. They had smart boards of then, and yeah, they had like really cool projectors built into the ceilings for different things, all kinds of stuff like that. It was funny too because while I was going to that school, I had I want to say 3 different friends. Yeah, 3 different friends that all had names started with B. And I don't think a single one of them. I think the last time I talked to any of them was maybe 10 years ago. I found out one of them moved to like Washington or something like that, and they were like living with their sister or something. But I mean, I wouldn't mind catching up again, but it's I just thought that was funny that they're most of their names start with B. But eventually, I went from that school, Turtle Bay, to a homeschool thing, like I mentioned before, and I did that from basically, I think 7th grade. Yeah, 7th grade to the end of my sophomore year. And that's actually I met my other best, or basically my best friend, that I've known since I was 12, who I met through my stepdad's work because his coworker was my best friend's dad. And it's funny because I remember meeting him at I think it was like a get together, because my dad and his dad worked at Target, and they had an actual employee kind of get together thing, barbecue for the store, and a lot of them of course brought their kids and stuff, and that's how I met my best friend. And I remember specifically one of the things he did when we first met. He was very quiet, but he had taken gymnastics as a kid, as like a younger kid, and he could do like a backflip standing off of the ground. Like he could just do a backflip. And cartwheels and stuff like that. And we got along pretty well after that. I was not that type of person. I could never do cartwheels or anything like that. Um, I think between most of my friends that we ended up getting at one point, there was at least 3 of us that were consistent when, like, between I would say for our high school years. Um, if you know what Ed, Ed, and Eddie is, I would be Ed, and then and maybe a mix of Ed and Eddie, um, just the single D one, not the double D one, and then the other 2 friends were one of the other ones. But uh, the the whole time when I was in high school, doing the homeschool high school, basically, it was interesting, but I wouldn't do it again. I would do it for my kids, but I wouldn't. If I had the chance to do it again, I wouldn't, because there's just some things you cannot experience in homeschool that you have to experience firsthand in high school. And I mean the good parts, not obviously the bad parts. I've had when I went to actually change from um, homeschool high school to regular high school. I had to go through hoops for that too. I ended up having to basically make up for 3 grades within a year. I ended up graduating early because of it, but I had to go through so much crap going through that whole situation, because essentially the high school I was going to, I got lucky for this, but essentially homework was considered extra credit. So I was doing homework every day, and I am making up for tons of time doing my extra credit, to the point where I was maybe 3 weeks before the end of the year, and I was a junior, and I was called into the counselor's office, and they said, "You have half credit left." And I was like, "Half credit in what?" And they're like, "In math. And then you graduated." I'm like, "Oh, I could graduate this year." And they're like, "If you can get a half credit in math." And so I sat in math class, I think 3 days straight, doing not only extra credit but regular schoolwork, until I got the credit I needed to graduate. And then so yeah, I graduated at 17, instead of 18, in a year early, and but also making up for years that the regular high schools wouldn't take, because they wouldn't accept homeschool credits. So I had to make up for a bunch of stuff just to get through um, get through high school. But yeah, high school was a trip, because it wasn't a regular high school too. It was a continuation school. So some people might recognize that as like a bad kid school, but there was a worse bad kid school where I'm from. So I can't remember the name of that one specifically, but the one I went to was like the one that was right next to another high school. Like you could throw a rock from one and hit the other. That's how close it was. And it was still a good school. There was a lot of cool teachers there. There was a little bit of controversy at one point. Apparently, allegedly there was a TA that was hooking up with teachers and students, and they got in trouble. Oh, actually, one of the biggest ones that I remember, biggest incidents that I can remember at that high school, was a kid tried to print out the anarchist cookbook, apparently, and the FBI showed up, and the kid got arrested and taken away for that, like from the school, because he was printing it all out. And if you don't know what that is, don't look it up, because you're gonna get in trouble. Someone's gonna get in trouble um, for looking into it. Essentially, you get basically put on a list if you look too deep into something like that. That's like basically dark web now, but back then, even though I think it was probably worse at some point. Um, I took notes so I wouldn't forget what I haven't talked about or talked about. So, anyways, after high school, of course, I needed to get a job, and my first job was at a Chinese food restaurant. It was kind of this corner of this strip mall Chinese food restaurant. It was good food. I am quitting there after I think 2 months because one of the owners just full on freaked out on me, and not like like right now you'd see like Gen Alpha or Gen Z kids like someone comes up to them in like the memes where someone's like, hey, let me show you how to do this thing, and then they're like, meh, and then they walk away or whatever. No, not at all like that. It was a waitress was carrying a pot of water, probably like a 3-gallon size pot of water that had been boiling, and she had spilt it on the ground, like dropped the whole freaking thing on the ground. And so water was all over this tile floor. And in my mind, I'm like, oh gosh, let me grab a mop. So I went and did that. I went and grabbed a mop, started mopping it up with the little, like ring thing, the thing that you wring out the mop with. I started, mopping, and I was already done with my task, which was dishwashing. So like the dishes were clean. So I started mopping, and this lady, which presumably I think I mean, it was a Chinese food restaurant, so you put 2 and 2 together on that. But she started yelling at me first in whichever language she chose to, yell at me in. May have been Cantonese or something. But then she switched to English, which was still really hard to understand for coming from her. I have nothing. I hold nothing against her, and I have nothing against people that are Chinese or anything. I just was frustrated that I was getting yelled at for doing something that needed to be done, which was mop up the mess. And that's literally what was happening, is she was yelling at me like red in the face, like she thought I dropped the pot, even though the girl was standing right next to her saying that she done it. And she didn't yell at her at all. She was just full on yelling at me. And I was like, okay, I'm done then. Bye. I just freaking left. And like, I don't know, a few days later, I went back for my last check when they cut it, and they were totally normal about it, which was like weird. But yeah, after that, I ended up getting a job with my best friend, with his dad and my stepdad at the time, which actually I think he ended up moving on to work somewhere else later. But when I worked there for exactly a year. I worked there from July to July the following year. And I didn't find out until like not even 2 weeks, not even close to 2 weeks. I found out from my stepdad that we had to move from where we were to, where was it? Roseville. Yeah, so from Reading to Roseville, just there was like a week in advance. And of course, Target requires a 2-week notice. If and not, of course, you don't. They required it if you want to go work there again. That's the fine print of that whole thing. So I told them I had to go because I can't live on the streets. I have to live with my parents because I was barely 18 or 19. So I had to move with them. I had nowhere else to go. So I had to move with them. I had to quit like within like a week's notice. I got to, the other location in Roseville and started working somewhere else. Find out later when I moved so many times and I was like, hey, I should apply at Target. They won't take you back if you don't do a 2-week notice. And keep this in mind, 20 years later, they still won't fix that crap. Because it's against policy to rehire someone if they don't do a background check, which I find is incredibly ridiculous. I'm probably more qualified than anyone that works there, at least when I applied then. And most likely now. Um, but I just find it absolutely ridiculous. That's the worst um, policy when it comes to rehiring that I've ever heard in my life. Like, I didn't do anything wrong technically. Like, I had to leave. I was a bit, almost a minor, not legally speaking, but like I had to stay with my parents. I had nowhere else to go, and I tried to explain this to the HR person too. This second or third time I tried to do it, because I was thinking like maybe there's a grace period, right? Like usually places have like a 7 year like forgiveness period where like if you do something with a company or even like the DMV or something, 7 years go by, then it's not on your record anymore or something like that. But literally 20 years later, after that, and I tried to apply at another Target. They said, no, sorry, the last time you worked here, you left without 2 week notice and you're unhirable. I thought that was, I still think that is the dumbest thing. It doesn't make sense. And they don't give you a chance to explain yourself. I believe if they had actually given me a try, given me a chance to work, I would have easily been one of their best employees. But I digress. I've had way more opportunities since then, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, since I had to move with my parents, leave Target last minute, I am moving to Roseville, California, and that's where I ended up getting another job. I worked for Lowe's for about 5 years. And then I eventually actually moved back to Reading to open a store, a Lowe's store in Reading. So, in the midst of all that, so I'd already just moved from Reading to Roseville. I obviously had to move and leave a lot behind, like friend-wise. And one of my good friends I mentioned before, named Dale, who I went to go camping with every year pretty much from like 10 years old to, gosh, 16, I think. Um, while while I was gone, he was going through some stuff too. He found his own way out. On his own terms. And I still kind of blame myself for that. I know I shouldn't, because, it's a choice that a person makes. And I still think, no matter who it is, it's the worst thing anyone can do. It's the most selfish thing anyone can do. And, it's something that, another cautionary tale. Stay close. Even if you're not physically there, stay close. Because it matters. Even if it doesn't feel like it, it matters. The worst part, besides the obvious, not knowing his full name. I don't even know where he's buried. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't visit him. But yeah. So I moved, back to Reading at one point. I am living with a roommate and another good friend of mine for I think a couple years, maybe only like a year, but working at Lowe's was an experience too. I am making a good friend that way too. He was one of my managers. His name was Otto. Still don't know where that guy is either. He was a cool guy. He was a really cool guy. He he and I had definitely very similar interests because we are both kind of movie nerds. And he introduced me to a couple movies that I'd never heard of before, and vice versa. I think one of the movies he told me about that I still love to this day, uh, and now I'm trying to remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was, oh gosh, it was a Christian Bale movie. Now I have to look it up. Ah, so the movie was called Equilibrium. Highly recommend movie, by the way. Teaches you a lot about different things. And society. It's to me, it's kind of got a 1984 vibe. Um, I think someone that's seen that would be like kinda, but yeah, check it out. It's a great movie. It's action packed too, so it's not like a full on monologue of whatever. Definitely check it out. But it's one of the movies that my manager introduced me to back in the day, and I'm still grateful for that because it's a great movie. I think I introduced him to V for Vendetta because he showed me that movie. I watched it. I was like, you know what? You probably like V for Vendetta. It was kind of like a definite, like, he loved that movie too. But yeah, so I was there at Lowe's for a while. I was living with one of my friends and his family just to kind of get my feet, settled and whatever. But at one point, I ended up going into the army, and it was at a point where I felt like I needed to get anywhere in the future. I needed to establish myself. I needed to learn more about who I am, and also, be a good part of society or something like that. But I also was probably doing it for a girl because like I thought if I could make it in the military, I could be a more stable source or whatever for you know. But anyways, I am going to the army in 2007. Unfortunately, getting medically discharged after I found out I had an issue that I didn't know I had. But if anyone's gonna find it, of course, it's gonna be the military. I still have my DD 214 sitting in a safe with all my military records and it, I don't know if achievements is the right word for it, but I went through a lot of everything to then get kicked out, and it's like, you know. But I think the things I did learn from the experience, I think a lot more people need to learn in general. That being like respect and duty and a sense of pride, I guess, in what you do, not only for your country, but as a whole for yourself. I like cut the country out of it. Think about, you know, the pride for yourself when you do something that is, important to a bigger group, like your family. Like doing something for your family, you should feel good about it. Like you shouldn't feel like crap about it. You should feel like honored and have pride and like, sure, pride might be one of the seven deadly sins, but it's only if you let it rule your mind. If like that's the only thing you do anything for is for pride, then that's a problem. So, but a little bit of pride isn't going to hurt when it comes to just acknowledging what you can do, and also integrity is a big one. I think a lot of people not only don't know what it is, but also they don't know how to have integrity either. In layman's terms, integrity is simply doing what's right when no one's looking. And I think a lot of people should know and act on that. Be something of an inspiration when there's no one to inspire. Um, but anyways, as I got out of the military and I went back to my family, who now lived in Carson City, Nevada. It was an interesting time for me because there was so much you still have ingrained in you after experiencing those kinds of things, and I wanted to do more, but what else could I do, right? So I tried to go back to work. I went back to work. I did end up working at a bunch of different places. I worked for Lowe's again. I worked for Applebee's. I worked for Hollywood Video, which a lot of people don't remember. It's basically Blockbuster or Redbox, but a store. I loved working there, by the way, because I worked on the Hollywood Video part of it, but attached to it was also a game store, of course. So I got to go in there and mess around and talk to the guys every once in a while too. I loved working there because I got to take movies home all the time and bring them back and stuff for free. And yeah, that was really fun. Really cool people I worked with there. I am moving. Where did I go from there? Oh yeah, we ended up moving back from Carson City to Lodi, where because kind of give you an idea of why we moved so often too. My stepdad was one of those managers who would go from store to store. So a manager that was so good at their job that the corporate side of things would be like, "You're really good at your job. I'm going to send you to fix another store." And that's what he did. He would go to other stores to fix all the little issues that they're having, whether it's revenue-based, employee-based, whatever, to find out what's going on. And he was good at it. I mean, things later fell through for other reasons, but that's neither here nor there. It's not his biography. But anyways, ended up moving again. Getting a new job in Lodi, Lodi's where I got the Applebee's job and the other Lowe's job. And a funny story. No, I don't think I should share that one. that one might be a little incriminating. I'll just say there was a nickname for one of our managers, and he was kind of a Richard, except the other name for Richard. So he was called Bildo a lot. But I'll leave it at that. Anyways, kind of a jerk, whatever, moved on. Left from there, came back to Sacramento area. Or no, sorry, first I moved back to Redding, where I was there. I had a roommate that wasn't my friend, but I was there for a while working. Where was I working at the time? I was working there. I don't remember where I was working at the I think it might have been Lowe's again. Yeah, I did go back to Lowe's again. So I left Lowe's in Redding again because I ended up meeting someone who who I actually met through another person, met through a friend. I am moving from Reading to come to Sacramento, where we eventually got married and everything here, um, and eventually divorced. But before all that, when I moved back here, my job was I worked at GameStop, and GameStop was really fun. I actually really enjoyed working at GameStop. I had a lot of friends there too. Made even more friends with customers that came in a lot. Um, I still talk to a few of them as well, and I think I have a lot of friends all over the place now. It feels like I have friends in other countries as well. I have actually. I'll tell you one particular friend that I haven't talked to in a while, but I know they're doing, or at least I believe they're doing really well. I haven't talked to them in a while because you know everyone goes through their own stuff, and I understand that. So, but I have a friend that lives in New Zealand, and they've been doing really well. Like, it's funny because we were both YouTubers. So if I didn't explain this yet, in 2008 I was a YouTuber, and my name was Gavix, and that's actually one of the characters in my book. But anyways, so Gavix was my name on YouTube. You could probably still find videos of me on YouTube or somewhere where my whole thing, besides being somewhat of a jackass, and by that I mean not like I meant like jackasses in the show or the movies. So at one point I was a YouTuber, back in 2008, and I did a lot of videos, essentially jackass style, where me and my friends were blowing stuff up with dry ice or tasing each other with a taser we bought from like some random spot. And yeah, that was the start of the videos. But then in one of those same videos, I burped really loud because burping was my thing. Like, I was really good at burping ever since I was a little kid. Like, I would go into the cafeteria to burp, and it would just shake, the walls kind of thing. Not literally, but it would reverberate, and everyone would stop and just like, what was that? That kind of thing. And it was really funny that all of nowhere, I was getting requests for more burping videos. So I was like, oh, sure. Why not? I love burping. It's easy. I can make, a bunch of videos about that, whatever. And so I did for a while until I found out apparently it's a type of fetish. And then I stopped abruptly. So, yeah, I don't do that anymore, obviously. I won't even do it now. I haven't tried to burp like that in probably since then, because I just, plus it kind of hurts now because I'm older, maybe. And I don't have the best, like, I get acid reflux and crap like that now, and it's not great. But anyways, yeah, so Gavix was my name on YouTube, and I burped a lot. And you could probably find those videos. I even did some, like, what's a good way to put it? I would send videos of myself for other content creators to use as like so one really big one is oh gosh, what was his name? Johnson. What's it? His last name's Johnson. Ray. So, oh, another big one is Ray William Johnson. So Ray William Johnson used to do a thing called Equals 3, and he would have a question asked at the end of one of his videos from a viewer, and one of them was me. So I asked asked ninjas or pirates, and yeah, he posted it on his video. So if you find his old Equal 3 videos, you'll probably find my bald head in one of his videos, um, asking that question. Another one that was really big was Cute with Chris. And it was this guy. He's hilarious. I kind of miss seeing his content. I haven't seen him in general on anything for a while. He's Canadian, but he was on it. I think later after doing YouTube, he switched to a TV show, um, and he ended up doing. He ended up becoming a little bit bigger. I think he stopped doing YouTube, but he used to do a thing where he would get animal pictures, like pets pictures, and he'd be like, "This is Cute with Chris," and he'd show off the pictures and funny videos attached to that with almost like America's Funniest Videos kind of vibe, but with animals. And then he would also have like a section where viewers would send pictures of themselves with their pets, and there's one with me holding my mom's poodle, which was a toy poodle. It was like barely this big, in my arm, and I'm like shirtless, and I'm like kind of flexing a little bit. But makes me feel older just thinking about it. But it was a good picture, I guess. Got some good reception apparently. But anyways, yeah. So I did a lot of YouTube, 2008, and then at one point I just ended up deleting it all. I actually did that a couple times where I just had like moments where I just didn't feel like what's a good way to put it? Existing is one way to put it. Not like doing the sewer slide kind of thing, but like just like if I could blip myself for like a little bit, like the whole Thanos snap for 5 years and then come back, I'd probably be okay with it. But that's in a way what I did with all my social medias at one point, including YouTube um, and other things. Like I delete like all of my followers, or not followers, all the people I was following. I would just like delete all of them, and I'm sure there's a few people, if they actually paid attention, probably noticed that, where if I was following them, I was unfollowing them, and then like a few days later I refollow them again. And it wasn't like a spring cleaning kind of thing. It was just like I didn't want to see anything anymore, for that, at least for that time. I wouldn't call it depression or anything. It was more just like a quiet that I needed, just to be, you know. Gosh, I'm sure someone will psychoanalyze that. But anyways, I'm looking at a list right now because I cannot remember half the stuff I wrote down for everything. Um, oh yeah, so one of the things between the time I was living in Redding and the time I was living in Roseville, Sacramento area, which I come back and forth to at least 2 or 3 times. And one of the things I am doing when I hit like 18, I got a tattoo on the back of my neck. I'm not going to show it because it's on the back of my neck. But the ones I can show, I have one on my arm here. It's a cross, like a Celtic cross. And then I don't have anything on this part of my arm, but I have one right here. And this is for autism awareness. And it's a puzzle piece thing. This one I did myself. So I actually did the whole tattoo on my arm. I am just going on Amazon, finding the stuff, and doing it myself. Yeah. And what else? Oh, I got my tongue pierced around the same time, around 2008, I think, as well. When I was dating a girl from Texas who we had never met. It was like a long distance thing. And I think I told her, if you get your tongue pierced, I'll get my tongue pierced. And of course, I ate that because she ended up doing it like the next day, I think. and she took a whole video of it and everything. And I was like, well, got to do it now. So I ended up getting my tongue pierced. It's still technically pierced. If I had something to show you to do it with, I don't know if this would work, but this is like the end of a toothpick thing. It goes in. It's just not long enough. But yeah. Anyways, that's a whole thing I've had for years. It healed up completely. It was funny because whoop, come on, focus. Okay. There you go. So, the really funny thing about when I got this done, because I went with my best friend, who, when we went, he said I passed out, but I don't remember passing out, which I guess is technically a symptom of passing out, but whatever. It didn't last long because I was still in the same position that I remember being in. But anyways, I got it done, and then literally within like an hour of getting it done, I went to visit my parents who were at a friend's house, and they were eating pizza and stuff. And I don't know if I was necessarily hiding it from them, but I wanted to surprise them. And so I like started eating the pizza and stuff. And even with the tongue piercing, the same day, the same hour that it happened, but it didn't bug me. It wasn't like painful necessarily. I guess the pizza's saltiness probably helped. But yeah, it wasn't that bad. I wouldn't tell anyone to do it unless you really wanted to, and hope that you won't have any aversion to needles, because they use a big one when they do your tongue, and it's hollow, so that when they pull it out, they're pulling basically a thin tube of meat from your tongue, so that when they stick the bar in there, there's room for healing and stuff. And you have to keep it in there for like at least a couple months, I think, for it to actually like fully heal. I think I had it in for, I don't know, like a year or two or something. But yeah, it fully healed, and I eventually took it out when it was just bugging me. It was hitting like my teeth, and I think I'd heard that someone else, not that I knew directly, but like maybe I read it or something, that bit down on theirs and like shattered one of their teeth, and I was like, no, I'm good. I don't need that in my life. Talk about pain. The worst pain ever, by the way, and I've fallen off of a house. I've been hit by a car. I have many cuts and bruises all over me from different things. The worst pain still imaginable, or not even imaginable because I've experienced it, is a tooth pain, 100%. Like on my birthday a few years ago, when my mom was visiting, she was like more than 5 years now. I had probably one of the worst toothaches I can imagine, and I had to go to the ER. And it was like the kind where you feel like you're on the verge of passing out from the pain, because it's like someone's driving a nail into your jaw. Fun fact with that is when they eventually did remove that tooth, they pulled out, there was a hole from my sinus into my mouth for about a day or two until it healed. So I could, if I wanted to, I could drink from my nose and it would go into my mouth, or vice versa, because there was a straight line from my sinuses here directly down into my mouth. So I know that probably made some people squirm a little bit, but yeah, it was an interesting experience. So anyways, working, experiencing all that, moving around so much. When I ended up moving back, and I was with my ex, or my wife then, I guess. Well, we were together longer than we were actually married, if that makes sense, before. So anyways, I was working at GameStop, I worked at Home Depot, worked at a bunch of different places while we were together. I worked for technically Sony too. It was Market Star Sony. It was like a subsidiary sort of third party, but not really kind of thing. Because my direct supervisor was with Sony, and he taught me everything. And then I learned everything from different programs and stuff directly through Sony as well. I went all over the place to check out some new information. Being one of the first few people in California to sell some of their 4K TVs, which was a big deal because the biggest 4K at the time was an 84-inch TV, selling for basically 85 grand. So it was basically $1,000 per inch, and it was a 4K TV back in 2012. Yeah, 2012. So back in 2012, and I also got a lot of like early knowledge about other Sony products working for them, which was really cool. I didn't get like a free PlayStation or anything like that. That was more of my leader or my supervisor's thing because he worked directly with them. But I did get a lot of really cool information. I really got to hang out with some really cool individuals, and like basically what my title was Sony sales specialist. So I would go to stores. I would just hang out for the most part, not literally, but like I would have to wait for either clients to show up who needed information, or I would teach the salespersons on the floor of different locations how to sell our products, because I was just a font of knowledge for them, and it was always really cool to kind of help them get the sale. I didn't get anything out of it that I can think of. I don't think I made commission or anything like that. It was just more of just a presence that helped kind of or not reestablish, but kind of solidify the sales process for both the client and the salesperson. So, it's always nice to have that one person that knows everything about something. So if you're trying to get that information for a client, you're just like, oh, let me ask. There he is. And so I did TV. I did everything except for laptops. There was another person that did that that I was working with as well. And it's funny too, because while I was doing that, it was like a year or so later that Sony dropped all their laptops. So they ended up getting rid of that whole line or selling it to another company, I think. I don't remember who it was. It might have been like Toshiba or something. I don't know. But that wasn't part of my job to know that anyway. So, yeah, I loved working for Sony, and but they had to let go of a lot of people. They basically did a mass layoff because it felt like a temporary thing, anyways. Like they were really just trying to push as much of their product out as they could, because there was a lot of new product and whatever. Like that's all it was. That's what it felt like. After Sony, I ended up going to work for Home Depot. It was around that time where I separated from my ex, and actually in between all that, we had a kid. So my oldest son, who's now turning 15 this year. So he was born in 2011. Yeah. So 2011, and yeah, he's turning 15. And then I also have another son through another wonderful person. So that's kind of the catch up for that part of it. But anyways, after all that, after the divorce and stuff, is when I actually met her. It was like a month later after we decided to split up, essentially. And that's where I met her. Then, because my oldest son at the time, he was turning 5, 4 or 5. No, he was about 4. Yeah, he was 4. So he was 4, and he was going through a lot because we ended up finding out he has autism on the um, communication side of things. So it was hard for him to say anything at all. So if he was hungry, if he was upset or anything, he would just cry or grunt or like kind of point, but he never really said words. And he was already 4 years old. This one, the youngest one that I have now, who's turning 5 this year, because there's 10 years between them, um, he started talking when he was like, I want to say 2, something like that. I mean, everyone's a little bit different, but it was pretty obvious for my oldest that he was having some difficulty. He ended up going through different things to get therapy, like speech therapists, things like that, which was great. It's worked for him drastically. Like he's great now. Like he still has a little bit as far as like social interactions and things like that he's still working on, but I think I don't think that goes away. I think everyone has a level of awkwardness to them to some degree. At least I did, but yeah. Um, but yeah. So after the divorce and everything, we were still like doing co-parenting and stuff like that, which is I never had a problem with. But it was through a lot of that where I started figuring out more about myself too, as far as health. Um, because along with having different learning disabilities with my ADHD and things like that, and after being in the military, and also at one point because I had a kid, I wanted to learn more about um, health in general. So I actually ended up becoming EMT, and my main reason for that was because of my son. And I wanted to make sure that if anything happened, I knew how to take care of it, or at least how to get him the correct treatment, or take him to the hospital because of A, B, and C, or something like that. So I was EMT for a few years up until 2016. So no, that's when I became one, and then I think it was 2018. Yeah, so it was about 3 years that I was at EMT. Um, so I went through a lot with that too, having experienced a lot of different and interesting situations. I won't go into too much detail because it's the best way I could put it is it's a little bit rough for a lot of people to hear. Even other people I know that were in the military don't like to hear about some of the stuff I've been through or seen or experienced. And I'd say not to deter anyone from being an EMT, because it's a very noble thing to do. It's something that it takes a lot out of you, but just as much as it takes out of you, you can put into it as well. Because I think I grew more being an EMT, learning from that experience and seeing the fragility of humanity and stuff like that. And that's just healthcare in general. I have a lot of respect for the healthcare professionals and things like that, having been one. Um, and don't let anyone tell you that if you're an EMT, don't let anyone tell you that your job isn't worth it, because you see any show where there's someone in a hospital, or a movie or someone's in the hospital and they're alive. The reason they're alive is because an EMT or a paramedic. Because if we weren't there to get them to the hospital, to package them and deliver them, they'd probably not be alive. So think about that next time you see someone get wheeled into a hospital, because that's a lot of work to make sure that the doctors and nurses have less to worry about when they get their patients. So yeah, it's just some food for thought. um, and considering everything I've done too, because I was an EMT not only in an ambulance, but I was also an EMT working for a casino as well. So it's a little bit of a different experience. It was less, it was more like a security guard than an EMT, but there was still bits and pieces of EMT stuff that make it interesting, exciting, a little nerve wracking, um, But yeah, I met a lot of interesting people while I was actually um, working as a security guard at the casino where I was working. I got to meet uh, of all the people that I met as far as like celebrities. And I met a few actually. Um, I met Bobby Brown, uh, which was interesting. He was nice. I kind of met him without realizing it was him at first. It was kind of a funny interaction where I was walking up, you know, security essentially, and there's these three individuals standing outside of a room, and it was a lady and two gentlemen, and I politely I was like, "Hi, how you doing? I was just letting you know that we can't exactly hang out in the hallway. If you want to go inside and chat, that's fine. Just the hallway needs to be clear just in case of emergencies and things like that." And they're like, "Oh yeah, no worries." And the lady turned to me and she's like, "Oh, were you here for the concert?" I was like, "Oh no, I just started my shift, so I didn't get to see it, unfortunately." And she's like, "Oh, have you heard of the band and stuff?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, you know, I'm familiar with that group and stuff like that." And the guy who I later found out was Bobby Brown was like, "Oh, what do you think of him?" And I was like, I heard this song like My Prerogative back in the day, so I was like, "Oh yeah, I love that song. It was great, blah blah blah." And the lady turns to me and was like, "That's Bobby Brown you're talking to." And I was like, "Oh snap! Oh shoot! What?" So yeah, we talked for like I don't know a few minutes, and before like they left and stuff. But I was like, "Dang, I like of all the things like." I met Bobby Brown. That was interesting. Actually, another thing too is when I was working at Target, um, Val Kilmer was there. He had broken his watch, and he had showed up on his motorcycle, but his watch was loose. It was like probably a Rolex or something, but it was like a metal band, like watch, and it was just dangling on his wrist. Like the part that's supposed to latch wasn't latching or something. I don't know what the full story was, but I had heard it when I walked past the jewelry station at the Target that the girl, or he had asked the girl that worked there if there was a screwdriver he could use, like a jeweler screwdriver, and we weren't allowed to let let customers use it, but once they found out who it was, of course, they were like, "Oh yeah, yeah, let them." um, rest in peace. But yeah, they for both of them. Was Bobby around? I don't know. But anyways, either way, yeah, I got to meet a few celebrities here and there. That was really cool. I went to an anime convention with one of my best friends, and we all got to meet Steve Bloom. Is it Stephen Bloom or Steve Bloom? I think it's Steve Bloom. But yeah, he's the voice actor for Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop and hundreds of other things. That's probably his most famous of roles, but yeah, he's probably one of the few individuals I would credit to my interest in voice acting, um, among other people as well. But yeah, his stuck out with me. So like when he did the robot from Toonami, um, that was always really cool. Even though like I knew he was before that, but like I was like, holy crap, that's Steve Bloom. This like it sounded like him, So I was like, that's freaking awesome. Um, but yeah, anyways, among the many things that I experienced with being an EMT and figuring all that out, being in the military, being an EMT, um, and learning about health, it definitely, I would say it took its toll. Because at one point or other, I had to, go to like a therapist, psychologist or therapist, one of those. Actually, both at one point. Um, and I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Um, and I think I've been doing pretty well. It's kind of a switch theory thing where If the situation arises, it turns on. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But situational, but still, it's one of those things that you once you've experienced it once, it, you know it's coming every single time. Like it's just a wave of the worst feeling you can imagine. And it's not even it's not even fear. It's it's almost like claustrophobia without the phobia part, if that makes sense. It's like being weighed down without being weighed down. It's like being on fire without being on fire. Like, does that make sense? It's everything that you could imagine as a worst case scenario happening all at once, but you're in the most calm situation possible in some cases. Like I'll be just sitting here, like when it would happen, I could just be literally sitting here, not anything going through my mind, and all of a sudden it's like a wave of bullshit just went and hit you. Not literally bullshit, obviously, but like just the wave of full force feeling, like starting from your head down to your toes and back up again, and it's just wave and it radiates, and there's no pain involved. It's just you're all of a sudden, and it doesn't even happen all the time this way either. Sometimes your heart just starts beating faster, where you don't know why. It just starts beating faster, and just that feeling alone, just your heart beating faster for no reason, like you're being chased, but you're not running. Like there's so many things. There's so many ways to describe anxiety, and that's probably one of the best ways I can describe it. Is just a constant. Actually, the best way I've ever heard it described, if you play video games, is when you hear the boss music, but you don't see the boss yet. So when you're in a room and all of a sudden the music changes to something intense, but there's nothing around you to give you that sense of like what's happening. And that's honestly the best way I can describe anxiety or panic attacks. Sometimes your heart starts going crazy, and sometimes it just feels like your head is like wave after wave just getting bombarded by this like feeling, like a rushed feeling, like you almost have to take a breath, like you're almost out of breath but you're not, and it's horrible. It's like the worst feeling. And the worst part of it is long-term stress from anxiety and panic attacks can technically kill you once it's affected your brain enough. It's actually, I believe it's linked to things like dementia if it happens too long. So that might as well be another reason for me doing this. So is to maybe look back on it if that's ever the case, but cross my fingers. But anyways, yeah, after doing all that, having a new partner, she and I'm obviously getting pregnant, and we have our almost 5-year-old now. And then eventually, after all that, after being an EMT at different locations, I did Lyft for a long time. I ended up getting over 1,000 different rides. I had like 5 stars and everything. I had to stop doing that when I got another job where I was for a little bit over 5 years, and it was a junk collection company, a big one. I'm not gonna say who because, but they ended up having to sell to another company, or the franchise owner had to sell to another entity, and they basically, for the most part, mass laid off the majority of the employees, including myself, who was basically the highest paid person there, and I was essentially the operations manager slash interim general manager for at least almost 6 months, I think. At least 6 months. Let me think. Yeah, from over 6 months, because it was last year from April to November. April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Yeah, so 7 months. So during that whole time, trying to do everything I can to fix this location up, get everyone into ship shape, um, doing everything I could, trying to bring morale up and things like that. And then they kind of pulled us aside, or pulled me aside first, to let me know that they're selling and that we were basically effectively fired. But we had a chance to rehire with this other group, which felt like the most, I don't even know how to describe it. It was one of those interviews where you walked in knowing that you weren't going to get it. Like I tried, but I knew, like I just knew, like that, especially for the position. I knew 100% because of the position I was in, that I wasn't gonna get it, because the person that was my position before was sitting next to the person doing the interview. So I was like, yeah, well, why would you're not gonna have two general managers, especially for a location so small. So there was like no arguing there. And I'm sure they would. I'm sure they would think it was insulting to try to hire me at a starting position again, uh, and they probably would think that I wouldn't want the job or something like that either. So, um, but I was one of those managers that, in the time that I was there, because they had a tip system. I didn't take tips the last like 2 or 3 years that I was there. I stopped taking them because I knew, like, I was already getting paid a lot, and the guys out in the trucks, they already have to deal with the weather. It's super hot here during the summer. The air conditioners didn't work in the trucks half the time, if that, and probably not at all in some cases. And they were dealing with a lot, and I felt for them. So anytime I had to go out in the trucks with them and we did jobs, I just gave them the whole tip, because it was me who would split them up anyway. So like, if I was doing the tips, I knew, like, oh well, that was me and so so he gets the whole thing. And that was just how I felt it to be fair. I just did that. So it was something hard in the way of morale, mostly because there were so many limitations. Mostly, when it came to not revenue, budget, there was limitations. So we couldn't fix the trucks the way we wanted to. We can, offer more pay for any reason, things like that. And then when these new people show up, they're like, "We're gonna give you all that," and it's like, well, what do you need me for then? Uh, but yeah, so that's pretty much caught up at this point. I think now I've been out of regular work, I should say. I've been doing voice acting. I've been doing writing, which I haven't really touched on. I guess I've been writing since 2010, and I've had ideas well before that. Um, like I said, the one of the main characters in the stories is named Gavix as well, and it's the character, or it's the name I used when I was doing YouTube back in 2008. But I've had that name for a character since, probably early 2000s, something like that, since like junior high. And because here's a kicker for that character name, and the character originated from a fanfic of Dragon Ball Z. So it was something me and some of my friends did, I think. Like, we made our own little, game handles, usually with SSJ in front of it. and mine was SSJ Gavix, Super Saiyan Gavix, and I think that was my Xbox handle for a long time. It's probably out there still, but it hasn't been online for years. So, um, so yeah. But anyways, so at this point, I'm still looking for regular work, but I've been voice acting, not really landing anything solid as far as like pay or anything, but still having fun with it. Been doing my writing, which is still really fun. I have 3 books out, 3 novels and a children's book, and I'm working on a 4th novel that follows the other ones. So that's that side of things, and by the time someone might watch this, they would probably know about more than that. Maybe, I don't know. But and then I'm also doing streaming and things like that on YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, and TikTok. So I'm trying to do as much as I can to get somewhere, because I feel like everywhere I apply, I feel like I'm the old guy applying now that's trying to get a job, and either I'm overqualified for everywhere I've applied, or I'm underqualified in the way that I don't have a degree through college or university, because a lot of the places I've seen require some version of that, like a bachelor's degree in business or something of that nature. And it's unfortunate that I can't just say, well, I have 20 years of sales and customer service and at least 5 to 10 years in management. So, yeah. But no one wants to listen to that. They want to see results, and they think that for some reason a paper that has a signature on it that's not yours somehow defines that for them. So, I'm gonna keep doing what I can, and I, I like as much support as I can, doing what I do and enjoying it. Um, I even started to read my very first book, which I have right here actually. This is my first book. I've done a bunch of edits on it and re-published it at least like twice, I think, uh, with the edits in it. And I'm gonna read it on TikTok, or not TikTok, on Twitch, and yeah, and I hope people like it, because that's the biggest thing for me, is the story, and just trying to support my family. Um, so I mean, I wouldn't ask for donations. What I would ask for is someone to get my book, get my books. All of them. I don't care. Just I asking for like nearly the lowest amount that I can get out of these books, even though I'm technically reading it for free to you guys, but on Twitch. But if no donations, I'd rather you guys get something out of it, and that's why I have the books. Um, and that's why I try to entertain too, because I want you guys to get something out of it. I don't believe in earning with no effort. You know, um, I'm gonna put my effort into it and hope that I get something out of it, and that's all I can really hope for. But anyways, this has been my sort of impromptu autobiography. You learned probably a lot more about me than I probably normally tell people. There's probably some people I know really well that watching this will be shocked by some of the things I talked about, and that's understandable. But it's all nonfiction. The only fiction in this whole video is in my hands right now, and yeah, that's my life so far. 40 years old in 2026, and if anything, I hope to hear something from, the people out there. Tell me about yourselves. I actually would listen to you. Probably one of the few people that would, when it comes to a random stranger, I guess. But I would be, I would be, excuse me. I would be eager to hear from other people as well about your guys' lives too, because we're all individuals and we all have so many things that are different about each other that, like I said, like my life is probably boring to some people, but I'm sure some of this is interesting to someone. And you know I think it starts with sharing, though, sharing who we are and our experiences that makes us unite in some way. Unite through trauma, I guess, or unite through laughs, or unite through life. But, anyways, I think anyone who actually watched this, please, as it says on the bottom here, follow, like, share, comment. I really honestly want to hear back from people. Let me know what you think of just, your input. If you want to even make like a follow-up video, I'll watch it and I'll do the same thing. I want to learn about people, you know. Um, I think we all do to a degree. I think a lot of us are just afraid of reaching out. Um, so yeah, reach out. Have a good one.